I've done balance, contrast, and alignment. In this video, I'm covering hierarchy and emphasis. I know I usually focus on one design principle per video, but I think these two go hand in hand. Hey friends, welcome back to the channel, your go-to resource from a New York City creative director. If you missed the other design principle videos, there's a link to the playlist in the top right. We are talking about hierarchy. When I say hierarchy, I'm not talking about your company structure or social class because those are annoying. Hierarchy in graphic design is where you decide the order of importance. It's a design principle that helps give your designs a focal point. Emphasis is similar, but it's more granular. Simplified, hierarchy helps guide your readers throughout the design, whereas emphasis creates moments in order to pace them. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Let's do it. Here is my guide to hierarchy and emphasis. Information hierarchy is the order of importance for elements. Visual hierarchy is how we lay out those elements, and depending how a designer approaches it, it can change the hierarchy. Let's dissect the menu at Restoration Hardware Guest House. If you haven't been, they have a delicious rotisserie chicken. It's also listed on the menu 3 times, but in different forms. The information hierarchy breakdown is the restaurant logo, the menu items in the order that you would consider ordering, so starters first, and then moving to salads and sandwiches. The mains start on the right side. A majority of people aren't vegetarian or vegan, so the plant-based mains are listed after the regular ones. Last for the menu items are the sides, and the lowest in hierarchy is the fine print. The visual hierarchy follows this mostly. Your guests probably know what restaurant they're at, so you don't need a giant logo, but the logo is still given the highest visual hierarchy by having it at the top, and it's also the only element in color. If you eat at the restaurant, I believe it's in gold foil, which calls it out even more. Within the menu items, we have the use of emphasis to separate the different elements. The dish names are given hierarchy over the category, description, and price. Emphasis is heightened through scale, but also in the use of uppercase versus title case of the descriptions. To separate from the descriptions, the price is in ital. I appreciate the use of italics here because they are in line. So you can see what I'm talking about here. If the prices are separated, I don't think it's necessary to change it stylistically with an italic, since the white space is what's creating the emphasis. Neither option is wrong, just a preference. Last, the categories are bolder and uppercase to provide some emphasis from the description. Typically, it's recommended to skip a weight for contrast, but that mostly goes for proximity. Since it's further away from the description, it's not that necessary. It also maintains the lightness of the menu. Not that my opinion matters here, but whoever designed this, I align with their design decision, so great job. It's great to look at good design, but it's also important to understand what's bad design. I want to show you what happens when the visual hierarchy doesn't really match the informational hierarchy. This is probably too small to see, so let's zoom in. I made these changes, so now we have the categories drawing the most attention because of the color. The descriptions have more emphasis than the menu items, which recede significantly, and then the fine print. If this was a menu I was presented with, I would question if the design decisions were influenced by the information hierarchy because it doesn't feel like it is. And that's what happens when you don't use the design principles. Let's break this all down and design something. Here's our text and images. First, we establish the information hierarchy. Our elements are a label which says Waste Warriors, the headline, striving for sustainability, some intro text, deep captions, and then we have some images, but there's, I guess what you can call it, a sub-hierarchy because one of the images is our hero and the rest follow the captions. As I mentioned earlier, you get to decide what the hierarchy is. For this, we can do it a few different ways, but they're really just versions of each other. First, I would move the label to the end, which brings our headline to the top. The hero image should be fairly important because it contains our subject. I'll bring that above the intro text, and then I want this to be more visual, so I'll have the caption images be priority over the captions. As an alternative version, I may want the hero image to be the largest. For a second hierarchy, we can swap those spots. And for a third hierarchy, I want to try one where there's only one hero image, so I've removed the caption images. I've been designing a lot of single page layouts for these, so this time I'll do it as a spread. We do have to do a few things first. The images. I have an image for each tip. These are all free stock and Creative Commons, so it's a little limited. This image with all the plates is meant to go with a tip about sustainable ingredients. I did research this. Grapes are not sustainable, so I'm replacing them with strawberries. I don't know what this is in the picture. It could be milk, which is also not sustainable. It does look empty, but I'll remove it in case. You should alter any elements for your intended purposes. The chances of somebody calling this out is unlikely, but this is what we mean when we say attention to detail. Here are the 4 subsidiary images. The spread is about sustainability. The images with the jars is too clean. An image that's more farm to table would give it the aesthetic that I want for the page, so I found this one. I want to push the green color a bit, so I'm swapping out the tomato image for some zucchinis or courgettes, depending on where you're at. This will be our hero image to use. It has somewhat, maybe rough isn't the right word, but perhaps raw aesthetic to it, so I don't want any of the images to be too clean. I can alter them by adding some noise to the images. I'll zoom in so you can see what's going on here. The left sides are the original image, and the right sides are where I added noise to the images. Let's move to the type. I did some type styles for the headline. I know this is looking a little crazy, but designed very loosely. I haven't gone in depth in the other videos, but I think it makes sense here because hierarchy and emphasis influence how your type is styled. Outside of the word sustainability, it's not that long of a title. This is in the thin weight. If we look at it in the bold weight, you can see quite a bit of a jump in the length, and these are at the same point size. Nothing to drill down on right now, but be mindful of how your typefaces behave. These 2 are just typed out right now, but we can merge the 2 weights for contrast. The first option, I went with this where I emphasized 4 in the lightweight and kept striving in sustainability in the semi-bold weight, giving them both equal hierarchy. The contrast could be increased here, and you do that through emphasis. The normal convention would be to go up in weight and emphasize in full bold, but I think it gets really heavy since we have 2 words. I decided to emphasize in the opposite direction by using an ital for 4 so that it recedes. This option works. I also like having an option where the title is stacked. There are only 3 ways to break this title. Striving doesn't really communicate anything to our readers, so it would be hard to justify having that be on its own line. Sustainability makes more sense to be by itself, which this option also keeps the line lengths closer together. The last option, I would like if this middle word was and, because then I could change it to an ampersand and explore some possibilities with that. Alas, the text says 4, so I'm not interested. For contrast, we're mixing the lightweight, and this time we can go full bold because it's not a majority of the headline. Since sustainability is the operative word, we should emphasize that and go with the bottom one. We can balance out the bold by making the words in the light ever so slightly bigger. This is currently left aligned, but I want them to relate closer together. The descender on the G is screaming to fit in between the tittle of the I and the ascender of the B. How wonderful. Just so you can see, this isn't perfectly centered, this would be, but this is what you call a typographic bus crash. There is another option we can do here. Typeface designers make sure that the character set works seamlessly together. If I needed this headline to take up more room horizontally, you can stagger the alignment like this. Look how beautiful the curve on the G matches the curve on the T. My heart skips a beat for these moments. In any case, both options give hierarchy to sustainability with an additional emphasis. I tried an option in a condensed sans serif. The headline is only 3 words. You may not need a ton of styling. I kept this the same throughout, but it's kerned. There should be some element of design to it, and we can do that by adding a texture, which is fitting since sustainable fabrics and ingredients have a lot of texture, and that can look something like this. We can also try this stacked and an option centered. Okay, now that the type looks different, if you wanted an option with 3 lines, you could pair 2 typefaces together here. It does feel really tall, so to condense the height, we could overlap and then change the color of readability. It still doesn't read, so maybe it's bolder. I'm not mad at it. Let's keep it for now. It's important to explore because you could convince yourself otherwise along the way. Last, I wanted an option that was super delicate. These are just typed out in lowercase and uppercase in 2 different serifs. These may not feel like headline styling, but you'd create hierarchy by adding significant white space around it, or adding emphasis by using a line to draw attention. We'll have to see when we start laying this out. Again, if our type is simple, we should still treat it in some way. For this direction, I'm going to have them super tracked out. All right, let's lay this out. I'll start with the label. I always tend to start with all caps. Warriors seem like an aggressive word, so to soften this a tad, I'll keep this in title case. This is quite small, but we can add emphasis by using a line to draw attention to it. A common mistake that I see designers make is that when they're designing spreads, they don't have any elements that span both pages. In terms of design, this is not considered a spread, it's just two pages next to each other. The line we have here satisfies connecting the two pages together. Here's the first title treatment. Then we have our long intro paragraph. Something to mention here, when you have large type, it's called display text. The typeface I'm using here is Ivy Presto. For the headline, I've used Ivy Presto Display, and for the intro, I'm using Ivy Presto Text. Type is designed specifically for those different sizes, so try your best to honor that if you have the fonts available, but certainly don't use display type for body copy and vice versa. We want to fix the rag here, and then we want to emphasize our subject, in this case, Chef Dan Barber, by making it bold. I'll add the hero image and then adjust to balance out that space. Now the rest of our content. The copy is a bunch of deep captions that aren't sequential, so they don't need to go in a particular order. I do want a somewhat large image here to anchor this right page and bleeding at the top so that it overlaps the line. You can assume the line goes behind the photo, but you can emphasize that by placing the image in an area where you see the line on both sides. We can drop in a caption. When I design, I try not to have two text boxes next to each other so that they have their own moments. Since we have text, underneath should go an image, and then the corresponding text underneath that. We have two green images, so we should balance this out with the other green image opposite and similar size. This doesn't look like a ton of space to fit the last image. I think I mentioned this in another video, but I prefer the light source in my images to come from the top left, so I'll rotate this. Now we need to make room. The left image can get smaller, and so can the other green image. I want to call out that the text didn't get smaller, but the images did. This actually helped the layout because we've created more white space, and now everything fits. We can make adjustments. For the hero image, the text can actually read in the space above him in the photograph. We need to bring it down to center it within that space. I think this is a good layout. I guess I have to think that. With this, we can drop in our other type options. This works fine, and then here is the other one. Because of the stagger, I want to change this a bit like this. With this option, yes, there is a widow here. I tried to re-rag this text, and this is the best option for it to read at this point size. In this case, I wouldn't want to sacrifice readability for the sake of that widow. Here are the three options. I know they're small, but viewing it at a smaller size, the hierarchy should be very apparent, which they follow the first hierarchy we set earlier. There could be an argument that the image is too large, but because there's so much empty space, there's still a focus on the headline. Intro text is quite big, and there's more of a focus on the images than their captions. Waste Warriors is the smallest, but we used emphasis to draw attention to it. Again, we need to connect the two pages together. For this option, we can break the headline so it spans both pages. This is the center of the spread. There's quite a bit of space to accommodate the inside gutter margins. I don't see how we can design around the headline in the middle, so I'll move that up. Here is our intro text, and then we want a big hero image, which also spans both pages. Drop in some captions. This time I've stacked them. The left alignment with the intro copy emphasizes the vertical edge of our hero image. Nice clean lines for our layout. We can drop in our images. This time I've given them equal hierarchy, just like the captions. However, the space between the first two captions is distracting. You can fix this by not giving each caption an image and using two images as more atmospheric elements. Last, we have our label. We emphasized the vertical alignment earlier. We can do the same here by left aligning the label to the images and then further emphasizing by literally using a vertical line. I don't think we have any adjustments here. There's already an overlap with the headline and the image, and again with the photos over the line. We'll drop in the other styling. He just needs to get bigger. Great. We do have a third styling for this. It doesn't work in the same spot, so we can use it on the left side. I'm going to create overlap right away by bringing the headline down and having his head go over it. Since we read the tops of characters, this text still reads properly. We can drop in the rest of our content. This layout is very similar to the layout we did on the right-hand page earlier, but with the intro text, and I'm also overlapping one of the images. Label feels lonely up there. I want to anchor it to the title. I like the line, but if I'm going to keep it, we should use it again somewhere like this, which emphasizes one of the images. Here are those options and a reminder of the second hierarchy that we set. The first option, the headline is bigger than the hero, so it does fall in the first hierarchy we set, but the other two achieve the second version. These are our leftover type styles. I'm not really loving the 3 lines of copy, and the others are so similar. I'm just gonna use this one for fun because we rarely do all lowercase headlines. This will feel much better on the left side. For this, we wanna focus on our third hierarchy, which has the hero as the most prominent element. We can do this by having the hero span both pages, and then he can get really big. I'll show you the center of the spread again so you can see that he doesn't crash into the gutter. Let's drop in our intro. We don't want our text loading. If you remember from the alignment video, you can reference other elements to give purpose in its placement. I'm going to align the headline with his eye level, which directs the reader to him. For the intro, it's actually already aligned with his shoulders, so I'll just keep it right there. I want to keep the type really soft, so I'm going to make it even smaller. Reminder again for the hierarchy, we remove the images from this option and want to focus on the deep captions instead. Let's add those in. This would be a clean way to style them, but how the columns end create an awkward diagonal. I'll keep this simple like the last one and stack them. This is a little boring since we don't have any images. To create some emphasis, we can break the alignment for one of the captions and then further emphasize that with a box. Finally, our label, which I've added in the top left. Great, now some final adjustments. We need overlap. I know I always do this, but it's one way that I know that it's my work. It may seem trivial, but this is also my not so subtle way of telling you to develop a signature in your work because that's what signifies your approach as a designer. Random story time. At a previous job, there was a project that printed incorrectly and somebody said, I think Tirsa worked on it. And I was looking at them like, no, there is no overlap on that page. The descenders and ascenders are crashing and the honey should be in a vessel. Definitely not my work, but with that said, find yourself as a designer. Back to our layout. It's going to be hard to overlap with the full bleed, so what we can do is add a border and then emphasize our label with a thick line that overlaps. And then to further emphasize, we can just add a touch of color. Another way I can add overlap is by mimicking the subtle shadows in the photograph and adding a shadow over the entire page, but very soft. Since we lost the line, we can make the label in color. These are the two options which fit the third hierarchy we set. These layouts look very simple, there's not much going on at all, but because the hero image is so big, there's impact in scale. As a recap, here are all the options. So that is hierarchy and emphasis on graphic design. There are definitely a few more ways that we could have done this, but that should give you an idea how hierarchy and emphasis influence your design decisions along the way. In these videos, you're seeing the science behind design, and how we individually approach a design problem is what generates different results. I apologize I didn't do this in the last video, but in the description is a packaged InDesign file if you want to work on some layouts. Send them to hello@tirsogamboa.com if you want any feedback, and if you want them reviewed on the channel, let me know. Drop any comments below, and I'll see you next time.